Hi and welcome everyone to our latest live video, Northern Affinity. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Dom today. So Dom Wint is going to talk to us, as you can see on screen. We're going to talk about websites today and getting the best out of your website. I'm going to leave that over to Dom to explain what everything's going to do. So I'll do that in a second. As usual with these sessions, we are live on various different platforms at the same time. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you are on there watching this live, if you've got questions, if you've got comments as we're going along, please feel free to put them into the comments box, and we'll try and cover as many as we can during this time. I know a number of people probably may be watching this now on demand because the nature of social media, you do see these things later. Again, feel free to put some questions and comments in, and I'm sure Dom will be more than happy to pick those up as and when we go through it. So I'll stop talking. I'll hand it over to you, Dom, if you just want to introduce yourself first.
Yep. So as you can see, my name is Dom Wint. I run a company called Clean Page Design. So I build websites for SMEs, and I've been doing that since 2011. So I celebrated my 10-year birthday in March this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a slog, but we got there. And yeah, my 11-point website service plan, just looking at kind of making sure your website's behaving itself. There's some things that you see crop up quite regularly, just things you want to check. And also just to go over a few bits, changes in sort of the law and recommendations for policies and things like that. So sounds a bit dry. I've tried to spice it up as best I can, but we'll see how we get on with that.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's obviously really, really important for most businesses, especially probably more so than ever in the last 18 months for their website, what an important part it is of their business, and it will continue to.
Yeah.
So yes, I'll leave it to you then to go into your 11-point plan. Like I said, if anyone's got any questions and comments as we go along, then please let us know. But when you're ready, Dom, I'll put the presentation.
Okie doke. So hopefully is that all good? We can see that.
Perfectly, I can see it perfectly.
Right, so is your website behaving itself? So I've put all this because this actually got bumped. I was supposed to do this a couple of weeks ago. So all the resources that I talk about are on that link there. I'll repeat that at the end as well. But I've put links and things in there for anything you don't catch. And also there's a link to this slideshow if you want to sort of refresh your memory and go through it. So we're going to start off with something that's a little bit, I don't know why I put this one first, actually. I haven't thought about it yesterday, but it's a little bit niche, but it's worth checking. So when someone types in your domain name, what happens? And it sounds like a silly question, but as you can see from the picture, yourdomain.com is not always the same as www.yourdomain.com. And that will sometimes depend on how your website's been set up. And the issue that can present is that if you type in yourdomain.com and it resolves to yourdomain.com, and then you type in www.yourdomain.com and it resolves to www.yourdomain.com, potentially Google will see that, or search engines will see that as being two separate websites. So there can be an issue there with the content on those competing with each other, and Google's not quite sure. When I say Google, I mean search engines in Google. In the UK, I think it's about 95% of search goes through Google. So they're interchangeable as far as I can see, although there is merit to using Bing, and that's another discussion. So Google or search engines potentially see that as a conflict, and they're not quite sure which is the authoritative site. So it's worth, if you use a CMS like WordPress or something like that. I mean, I build all my sites in WordPress, but if you use something like WordPress, chances are it will deal with that. If not, you might have to do some, or ask your developer to do some behind the scenes work to make sure that a canonical URL, like the definitive version, is set and everything resolves to that. Does it matter if you use www or not? No, it doesn't. There's a link in that resource, the page that I gave you at the start, to sort of just explain the differences between and whether there's actually any benefit, but essentially there isn't, as long as when someone types in your web address, everything resolves to the same standard format. So just open a new tab, type in your domain without the W's and see what happens. Type in your domain with the W's, see what happens. If it all resolves to the same place, then you're good. And if not, have a word with your dev and see if you can get that sorted out. And then while we're looking at the address bar, the secure connection, the padlock in the address bar, which we've kind of become familiar with now, and it's kind of become the norm, but there are still sites that don't use it. And there are some sites that have either paid for it or have set it up and it's not working. So this is back in 2018. I remember writing a blog post on this in 2018 about Google recommending that your site loads securely. So this is using an SSL certificate to load your site over HTTPS rather than just HTTP. And what that does is it provides a level of encryption so that any data that passes from a visitor's computer via your website is encrypted, and it can't be subject to what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. So that data can't be intercepted as it's passed between websites. And where that comes into play is obviously for something like a contact form, or you'll see it a lot more on e-commerce websites and shops. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have one, as long as your site is purely informational. Because if you're not passing, if no data is being passed, sort of sensitive data, especially, I mean, your IP address and things might get passed, and it's up to you whether you want to sort of protect that, etc. So it's not the end of the world. However, it's one of those things where people now are looking for that, and it will give your sort of website a little tick in the trustworthiness stakes. And Google, as far as I'm aware, Google does use it as a ranking factor, although there are hundreds of ranking factors, and it's not the sort of thing that if you have a padlock, you're suddenly going to leap to #1 in Google, and if you don't, you're going to end up on page 10. It's not. It's just one of many things that the algorithm takes into account when it's deciding how good your website is for presenting for a search result. So it is just an extra trust factor. If you have a contact form or anything like that on there, it's worth having that. And obviously, if you have an e-commerce site, so we're going to veer off a little bit on the e-commerce side of things. Sometimes with an e-commerce site, you will use a payment gateway like PayPal or Stripe, and those providers will take care of the security. So technically, it doesn't matter if your site is secure because those payment gateways are secure. But I know I do this. I don't know how many other people do this. When you're online shopping for things, particularly with websites that aren't household names, let's say, I wouldn't use a website. I wouldn't put my payment details into a website that didn't have a padlock. So from a trust point of view, it's essential. So if you type in your domain name and the padlock appears, brilliant. If it doesn't, then again, you need to speak to it depends how it's hosted, speak to your developer, speak to your web design company, speak to your hosting company if you take care of it all yourself. If you have paid someone to set something up, and it's not working, you're still getting the alert triangle, or you've tried setting it up yourself and you're still getting the triangle, there is a website called whynopadlock.com. Again, the link's in that page that I mentioned. You can type in your full URL with the HTTPS, and it will, on a per page basis, it will scan that page and it will then give you a pretty basic and easy to read in plain English report as to why what's happening. Usually it's images. Sometimes, especially if you've got an older site that you've then moved to HTTPS or moved to secure connection, you can end up with some images that get left behind, particularly background images and things that are sort of the furniture of the site. And that will give you a list at the bottom of the results page to tell you what's gone on and how you can fix that. So that's something you should be checking. Then in terms of, so this is for two reasons, the links in your actual site. Okay, so it's a good habit to get into to not only have obviously your main menu wherever that sits, usually beneath your logo or to the right of your logo is the kind of current trend or norm. And when you write content in your site, say you write a blog post or you add new pages, you add portfolios, items, you add case studies, the more ways that a person can access that, not just using the top menu, or a search engine, spiders can access that, the better, the more open your site, particularly from when we're talking about search engines. When you launch your site and add new content, the search engines will send their spiders. It all sounds very kind of, I don't know, kind of like a horror film. The spiders go out and they crawl through your site. And what they're doing is they're looking for all the information. They're looking at the structure of the site. They're looking at what's going on. If the only way they've got to get through your website is the main menu, there are things that potentially could get missed. So it's a good habit to get into. Say you've got a section on your homepage that says you're a kitchen fitter, let's say, and you say, oh, we use all the latest technology and we work with certain materials, including like, I don't know, silestone worktops. If you link silestone to a case study that talks about using a silestone worktop, it might be that someone's looking for that or they're interested in that, but there's no way of accessing that information, or there's no obvious way of getting that information without going through the main menu and looking at particular case portfolio items. So the more sort of links you give to people to help them sort of guide them through the site, the better. And the same from a search engine point of view, the more ways you allow the search engines to access all of your site, or as much as you want, come to that in a second, as much as you want them to access, then the better. So, and it's also a good habit to get into if it fits what you're doing. Don't just do this for the sake of doing it, to link out to other websites. So say you're an accountant and there is a particular piece of news, either from something like the ICAEW or something that's on the BBC or the Times or something like that, that's behind a paywall on the Times, so probably not the Times. If they say something in a way that you kind of can't really compete with, it's as well to send them to the BBC, let's say. If you link to that, so that's a good habit to get into. But over time, obviously, what happens is you change your content, things you've linked out to stop working, pages disappear. So it's a good idea to check from time to time that the links in your site aren't broken. So again, in the resource that I mentioned, there's a website called Broken. This is just one of many, but there's one called Broken Link Check. Put your URL into there, and that will spit out all the broken links in your site, and it will give you links to the code, so you can have a look at where they are and you can go and fix those. So yeah, just make sure that your content's not sort of getting lost or not found because you're just leaving everything up to the main menu to sort of help people and help Google to find everything that's in your site. So moving on from that, we can then look at, has your website actually been indexed by search engines? As in, have you allowed search engines to have access to your site? And if you have they indexed everything that's on there that you want them to? Okay, so there is a file within or there can be a file within your setup called robots.txt, and in that file you can tell search engines whether you want your site indexed or not at all, and B, you can tell it what you do and don't want it to index. And within, if you have a WordPress site, or you can do that in other ways, but just generally, the robots text file will sort of stop search engines coming to your website or coming to certain parts. Excuse me a second. So it's a good idea to see actually what Google has on you, and then also kind of how it looks. So you can see on the image here, if you go to Google and you type site : and then just your domain name, no W's or HTTPs, that will then bring up every single item on your website that's been indexed. Now, as far as I'm aware, it's not in any sort of order. So as you can see here, I've done it for the BBC, and the homepage will generally be the first page that comes up, and then the rest of it is kind of seemingly in some sort of random order. I'm hoping, I don't know that the Somali news is the fourth most important thing in the UK that BBC's involved with, but there we go. So if you do that, it will show you what Google has on you. And just to explain that a little bit further, so this is a SERPs listing, so search engine results page listing. For me, this needs a bit of work actually, because you can see it's truncated at the end. I need to shorten that description. So there's three parts to it, as you can see. Just ignore the white tick. That's something to do with my search engine and a virus antivirus plugin. So there's the URL, obviously. There is your page title. And then there's the meta description. So the URL and the meta description as far as I know, are not ranking factors. So they're not used by Google to sort of to see how your site should be presented in the search result. But the page title is a ranking factor, and that's kind of what Google hangs how it interprets what's on your page. So if my page is called Web Design Manchester because I'm trying to target my services at Manchester on the home page, if then the content in that page talks about sewing machines and flowers, Google will think, well, there's a disconnect here. This is not what this page is supposed to be about. And then if someone searches for Web Design Manchester, my site doesn't have any chance of appearing because the content is not relevant to the page title. So it's kind of the sign on the door, if you like. If you walk through that door and everything inside that room is what you expect, is what Google expects to find there, then brilliant. But if they walk in and it's someone painting a picture, it's like, well, this is not what people want. So that's one of the things that Google uses as a ranking factor. But I will caveat this by saying I'm not an SEO expert, although I do know enough to be dangerous. So the page title. So if that's appearance, so sometimes if you haven't optimized those page titles, they can come up with it can just say home, or it could say something a bit that you don't want it to, and you have control over this. So it's one of those things where take advantage of it. Now with the meta description, although that's not a ranking factor, what you'll often see is companies will put things in there such as special offers, or they'll put in phone numbers, particularly something, say you were searching for an emergency plumber. If the result had a phone number in, although to save you having to sort of click through and find where to phone up, if the results have a phone number actually in the meta description, it might be that you would tend towards that one. I mean, we're getting down the sort of rabbit hole of psychology and things like that, but that you've got about 165 characters to use in that meta description. So if there's a way you can present as a sort of preview of what people are going to be finding, if there's something you think is really important to tell them before they even get to your website, it might be that that's something that you can look at. So it's worth investigating this and just spending a bit of time on making sure everything sort of appears in search engines as you want it to. Absolutely. And the same sorry, yeah.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Great. Yeah. And the same thing goes for when you share things to social media. So Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn use open graph data to determine how your pages appear when you paste them. So if you copy a link to something and then you paste it into a Facebook post, you'll get a preview of what will happen when you share that link. And you can see from the examples here. So the BBC one is reasonably well optimized. So I pasted in that cricket story. We've got a picture of England and Pakistan cricketers, so it's a relevant image. We've got a headline, England withdraw from Pakistan tour, so the headline's been optimized. And then the information beneath is a bit like the meta description, but as you can see, you've got a lot less to work with there. So you don't have quite as much real estate, if you like, to work with. If we then look at the one bottom right, so this is a random accountant. So apologies if this is your website. I'm sorry, but this was like, honestly, I think I searched for accountants in Stockport. I went to like page 6 and I found this one. So there we go. So names have been changed to protect the innocents. But as you can see, if there's nothing specified in the open graph data, then Google or search engines will find the first image that it can kind of read on the page. So not a background image, it needs to be an image that's put in the content, which is obviously this woman, presumably an employee at the accountants, maybe the person who owns it, we don't know. And then it will take the sort of first readable text that it can find, and it will present that as the headline and the description. So here you can see we've got this image, which I'm sure she's a lovely woman, but I don't know if that's the image that they want to present as their kind of lead off. And then it says homepage and their name, which is okay. But then chartered accountants based in Stockport, contact us, added value. So what that's done is it's seemingly taken the page title, or the headline on the page, chartered accountants based in Stockport. And then I presume, I can't remember off the top of my head, there are some buttons on there, calls to action, and it's taken the text from them and just presented them as this description. So again, it's not going to harm anything, but it's just that thing where if you're trying to sort of create that consistency across your brand and how you share things and how other people share things, then it's for the best that you can, if you can make sure things all tie up. So the website you can use to check this is called opengraph.xyz, and that will give you a preview for Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Discord. I don't know if anyone uses Discord. I'm not sure if I should be using Discord, but that uses Open Graph data as well. So it gives you a preview of that, and you can then, again, there are tools that you can use to optimize this for the main pages on your website. If you blog a lot or write news stories a lot, and you yourself share them and you intend them to be shared, then it's a good habit to get into. And there's a website called Free Code Tools where they have an Open Graph somewhere you can create Open Graph data. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there a second. So yeah, so again, a bit like your the page titles and your meta descriptions, it's just if your information is going to get shared around the web, or you're going to get discovered in some way, then whatever you can control to control that image that's presented, I think is worthwhile spending some time looking into it. And again, just forming habits with how you optimize everything that's on your site. So analytics, do you track your visitors? And do you actually do anything with that data? So I have clients where some aren't interested at all, some sort of are quite slavish to the data, and then there's a large section in the middle who they say they want to track the visitors, and then they don't ask for anything to do with the data, or you get a year into owning the website and they'll say, oh, have we got any numbers, or do we know what's happening? And so they're not using that information to their advantage. And obviously you can use that information to improve your site for people and to improve your site for search engines. With the Google Analytics dashboard, I mean, the amount of data it's anonymized. So that's, you can't sort of find out that Bob from down the road has been looking at your website, but or your competitors, for example. But you can do a huge amount with the data, and you can see how people are finding you in collaboration with Google Search Console, which is another tool you can use. You can see how people are finding you, what they've used to search for you. You can see what your most popular articles are. You can see how people, one thing I like particularly is, I think it's called visitor flow. You can see how people access the site. So you can see which page they enter the site at, and then you can see what happens from there. So a good way to use that, for instance, is if you have a call to action on your homepage, or there's something you specifically want people to do, or a path you want them to follow, you can see if they're actually doing that. So you can see you have 100 entries on your homepage, and then you have, say, 80 go to About Us, and then 60 go to Contact Us, and then do you get 60 inquiries, or what? So what's happening? So you can use that to follow people's journey through your site, and then you can sort of refine and optimize to make sure that people are doing what you want them to do. And if they aren't doing that, then you can start to look maybe at how you could improve that flow or that journey or your calls to action to actually get people to do what you want them to do. And it's a good idea, again, to get in the habit of, don't be slavish to the data, but if the data's there, use that as opposed to your gut reaction, sort of, oh, well, I don't really like green, or oh, I think we should just do this, or maybe, I would think this, therefore we should do that on the site. If the data suggests something, it's best to follow that data to a degree. But with that in mind, do your visitors know that you're tracking them, and are they okay with that? So I'll preface this by saying I'm not a legal expert. This is what I've understood from talking to people who are, and from hearing things and reading things around the web. So it's kind of linked with GDPR, but it's not GDPR. In terms of how you track people, and so if you want to track someone or to track visitors, you're going to need to set cookies. We've probably heard a lot about cookies in the last 18 months or so. But a bit like with GDPR. So GDPR, sorry, I'm rambling here. GDPR introduced this idea of explicit consent. So you'll notice a big difference now, or you should, and some sites still don't do it, but you'll notice a big difference now where when you go to pay for something on an e-commerce site, there'll be some tick boxes beneath the checkout, which one will say you accept terms and conditions, and the other one will say I would like to be kept up to date with Joe Blogs and what they're selling. Not Joe Blogs, the 80s, 90s jeans brand, just generic Joe Blogs. Showing my age a bit there. So, and they should be unticked. You have to explicitly tick to say you want to receive that, and it's not an opt-out anymore. So it's not if you don't want to hear from us, tick this. So you can't do that anymore. It has to be a positive opt-in, and that's moved across to, as far as I'm aware, that's moved across to the idea with cookies. So unless someone specifically says you can track their visit using cookies, you can't. So you'll see a lot of sites now sort of pay lip service to this with a banner that appears that says, we use cookies on this website, we'll assume you're okay with that, and the button, whatever, and you get rid of the cookies. As far as I know, that's not kind of within the guidelines. It really should be, you don't set any cookies, and you say to someone, we would like to use cookies on this website. If you're okay with that, click OK. If you're not okay, click not OK, or you can tailor what you can and can't, what is and isn't set. There is a base level of cookies. There is something called necessary cookies, so without which your site won't work. It's not that it won't do what you want it to do, but it actually won't work without cookies. There's a video of me showing you how this all works on that link that I mentioned. And the necessary cookies, ironically, the necessary cookies are the ones that are asking you if you're okay with the cookies. But beyond that, until you say okay, my Google Analytics doesn't the cookies don't get set. So I'm aware I've said cookies a lot, and now I'm hungry. Yeah. So make sure
time at lunchtime to be mentioning.
I know. Yeah, I shouldn't make too many mentions of cookies. I should have put a limit on this. So make sure that you're asking permission and you're getting permission. And the same thing goes with your contact form, and I'll come on to that in a second. But just first of all, talk about how your contact form works. So it's not unusual for messages sent via a contact form to not end up where they're supposed to end up. Again, with WordPress websites, the way that emails are sent from a WordPress site is quite unreliable, and there's ways and means around that to make it more reliable. And often, because of the way they're sent, they can end up in your spam or your junk folder. So it's a good idea every once in a while to go to your contact form or go to your call to action form or whatever it is and put in some details and see where if they even appear in anybody's inbox, and B, where they end up in spam or junk or in your main inbox, and also kind of what success message, if anything, someone's getting, or if they're getting sent to a thank you page, and make sure that that's all up to date. So there are ways around, or there are fixes you can do. The easiest one is to use an SMTP plugin, which then uses your host's mail servers to send messages, which is more reliable. If you really rely on email, say you have an e-commerce site and you definitely need people to receive, it's absolutely imperative that people receive receipts and you receive orders, then there are third-party services like Mailgun that will that you pay for, and they'll help make sure that the transactional emails all get there. But then just to pick back up on the consent thing, when someone fills in a form, what do you do with that data and how do you store it? So I think everyone's heard of this idea of legitimate business interest. So if you've got say my website, for instance, the form has name, phone, email, and some vague details about what sort of site you're after. And it's the same, presumably, for a lot of businesses: name, address, contact phone number, and a message. Someone sends that to you. Obviously, they send that to you because they want you to get in touch with them. So you get in touch with them regarding that inquiry, and that's legitimate business interest. If they then say, fine, I'm not interested, then that transaction is done with. You can't then use that data that you've received to send them more things and promotions and things like that, because they've not actually opted in to receive any further marketing. They've just used that form in legitimate business interest. So if you do intend to remarket to people or to send them more information, again, you've got to make sure that you've got their permission to do that. And also, depending on how your contact form or forms work, so for the ones that I use, for instance, has the ability to store the data within the website. So just and you can set how long that's stored and what actually is stored, etc. So if your website is storing that information, be aware of that. And then if someone has a request to see what information you have on them and to remove it through through a GDPR request, then you know that either you do or you don't, and you can deal with that accordingly. So just sort of to firm up what I've gone through in the last couple of slides. So it's pretty standard now to have a cookie policy. Your website might not use cookies. If you don't track anything, if there's no analytics, there's no sort of Facebook pixel and remarketing things, and there's nothing like heat maps or anything like that, it might be that your site's not using cookies. It's not sort of standard that it does. So check that it does or it doesn't. I tend to lean towards that, even if it doesn't, having a button on your site in the footer somewhere, let's say, that says cookie policy, goes to a page that says we don't use cookies. It's becoming one of those things where I feel it's kind of, again, like a sort of belt and braces. It's like a trust factor. You've got the padlock, you've got a privacy policy, you've got a cookie policy, you've got kind of phone numbers on there people can get in touch with. You're giving away information. You're letting people know, look, we're above the board. We're not above board. Sorry, we're not kind of trying to hide anything. We're not taking your information and doing something weird with it. We're all upfront about this. So we've got a cookie policy, we've got a privacy policy as standard. And then if you run an e-commerce website, you will need, or I would recommend that you have terms and conditions and returns policy potentially separate from your terms and conditions. And then if you're obviously in certain industries, particularly in the financial services, there'll be some industry specific wording that you'll need to have on there. So just don't try and go for the bare minimum, and don't try and hide things, and don't try to, or at least let people feel like they can get all the information they need, as well as sort of to get in touch with you and find out about you, all the information that they need to get the idea that you care about their data, you care about if they buy something from you, you care about how they receive the goods and how they can return them and what's going on. It just gives that overall impression, I feel, that you are what you say you are, and it probably sets you above your competition in some areas if you can sort of add these extra bits in. So we're going to look now at speed. This is something that gets mentioned a lot nowadays, and with good reason. So again, if you are, say you're at a networking meeting and you give someone your business card and they're interested in your services and they go to your website, they're probably going to be a bit more patient about waiting for your website to load. But if you appear in a search result for someone that's looking for a specific service or a specific product, and they click your site and they're waiting and waiting and waiting, there is research to suggest that if they have to wait too long, then they'll just go back to the results and they'll find someone else. So it's important that your website loads reasonably quickly, particularly the pages you're actually directing people to, or the ones that are appearing, that are optimized in search and are appearing at the top of the search results. I can't remember the exact date. I think it might have been towards the end of 2019, or it might have been the beginning of last year. Google introduced this idea of mobile first indexing, which means that it takes the mobile version of your website or the site as it appears on a mobile device, and it uses that as the definitive version of the site. This probably relates more back to when we used to have, if anyone can remember this, you used to have mywebsite.com was the desktop version, and then you'd have m.mywebsite.com, which took you to a kind of separate mobile version of the site. And the things not only looked different, but they had different content, and they were kind of stripped back to before the days of apps and before the days of responsive design, where your website adapts to whatever it's being viewed on. there would be a mobile specific version, which would be kind of a stripped back, pared down version with a lot less information and sort of more just buttons and things you could stab with your finger. Now that we have responsive websites where it's the same information across the two, perhaps presented in a slightly different way on a mobile, it's not such a thing that your mobile version will be radically different from the content that's on your desktop version. So, but it's worth making sure that the two match up and they are as close to the same as they can be with that's what I thought. With allowances, that's the word, with allowances made for the fact it's being viewed on a smaller device and a narrower, taller screen. So the website, I mean, there are oodles of sites where you can test your speed. Google, even within Google, there's two that I know of at least. There's Page Speed Insights and there's web.dev, which give you scores. Page Speed Insights is the one that I will go to test client sites. So that will give you it'll analyze whichever page you put in. It will give you a mobile result out of 100, and it will give you a desktop result out of 100. In fact, I will show you. So this is my site. There's some work being done actually since I made this slide. My mobile speed's gone up, but the desktop speed's pretty good. So mobile obviously at the top and desktop at the bottom. And it will give you, beneath these speed results, it will give you more data as to what it thinks can be optimized further in order to increase the speed. Something that often causes issues is images and image sizes, because sometimes images aren't resized and they aren't kind of optimized and compressed, etc., for viewing on a web. So someone will take a picture on their phone of something they've built or something they've fitted or something like that, and they'll upload it straight to the website. And you're talking about a file that's probably 4 or 5, particularly on modern phones, 4 or 5 megabytes worth of picture that's about 4,000 pixels wide, that's going to be viewed on a device that doesn't even require it to be particularly high quality. It doesn't need to be print quality to go on the web. It's never going to be viewed at more than, say, 1,600 pixels wide, if that. So images form a big part of it, and then it's also to do with the way that scripts and code and things load on the site. There's quite a lot of geeky stuff you can get down to, but images would be something that would be worth looking at. So, but what I want to do is compare. So this is Apple UK's site, so I can see I'm winning. If I was competing, I'm winning against Apple on the desktop. But but this is just to show that not every, just because yours isn't great, let's say 50 is not great. But neither's 54, and that's Apple. So it's not like it's just something you can just do, and all the big boys are doing it, and you need to worry about it. What I would say for this sort of thing is it's a competition. So if you know that you are competing against other websites in your sector, in your field, check what their sites are doing. So if yours is scoring 50, but everyone else, say the top 10 results for your search, they're all scoring 30 and below, then 50 is not that bad. And Google's going to look at this in a comparative way. It's not going to say, well, yours is 50, that's rubbish. It's yours is 50, but everyone else's is 30. Therefore, yours, in this case, yours gets the tick in the box. That doesn't mean that because yours is quicker than everybody else's, that will automatically give it a massive uplift. It's just another thing in the ranking factors. So when you talk about this sort of thing, I feel that you should check against your competition and try to, at the bare minimum, try to be better than them at that. So if they've got 300 words on their page about something, if you can write 400 that are equally relevant and well linked and well referenced and things like that, then your page kind of wins in that sense. So if they've got 10 sites around the web linking back to that particular page, because backlinks, so links from other websites to your website, as long as they're kind of good quality websites, it's taken as quite a large ranking factor. If you can get 15, then, and again, another tick for your website. So it's kind of stacking up these ranking factors so that yours outperforms the competition, so that when someone searches for something, Google can look through its results at lightning speed. And it takes great pride, doesn't it, in telling you that this search took 0.0002 seconds, and it can say, based on all the factors we've got here, we think that this page best answers that query or best represents that search term. So I've got a bit of a tangent there. So, but speed, make sure that yours is performing well. If you want a slightly more plain English result, because some of the stuff in PageSpeed Insights, it even boggles my mind. There's a website called gtmetrics.com. You can sign up for a free account, and I recommend you do, purely because if you have a free account and you're logged in, you can set from where the test is run, and you can also set the connection speed. So what I feel that gives you slightly more realistic results. So if you're based in the UK and you're only really targeting UK customers, you can set the test to run from London as opposed to San Francisco, and you can set the connection to, say, broadband fast. So it's kind of a generic quick broadband speed as opposed to like unthrottled, which obviously like lightning, sort of super fast, amazing broadband. So I think GT metrics, and what I would run more than one test at various different times. What you can do with GT metrics as well is you can compare. So you can you can get it to run your page, then compare with your page again, and you can see if there's a disparity there. And so sometimes just doing it once, you're not going to get, I don't feel, a true reflection of how well you're. So it's take an average over several days and weeks, and just kind of keep an eye on it. And if there's things you can do, then do them. If there's something you don't understand, then speak to your dev, and they can hopefully jump in and at least start nudging the numbers up a little bit. And then this is something that obviously comes up with your computers, with your IT infrastructure, with everything. If everything goes wrong, do you have a backup of all the data on your site? So it can be something, so your site can get hacked. Fingers crossed it doesn't, but it can. Or there's something wrong with the server's end, or the hosting company goes out of business. If you've got a backup, you kind of got the power then to move wherever you want to go. So make sure that the site's backed up. And this is something you'll have heard ad infinitum to do with WordPress websites. Out of the box, WordPress is secure as it's going to be, as long as your username is not admin and your password is not password. It's secure. The minute you start adding extra functionality using software called plugins, you start introducing the prospect of more vulnerabilities, and over time, people find ways to kind of get access to your site via these plugins and their vulnerabilities. So it's a good idea just to, again, regularly check. And if you pay for a service plan or a maintenance plan or whatever with your hosting company or with your developers, then they can do that for you. WordPress, in one of the later releases, also introduced the ability to enable auto updates on plugins and themes. I would recommend, if you run your own site, I'd recommend you do that, with the exception of some plugins. I'll mention one specifically. So there's an e-commerce plugin called WooCommerce, which, when it has an update from a very to a big version update, it can often present some problems. So that's when having a backup is great, because if you go to update WooCommerce and then it blows everything up, which it has been known to do, so there's a sort of running joke that you should always wait for the version 0.1 before you start updating WooCommerce. But for things like just sort of general plugins, as long as you've kind of they're well researched. I know there was a video that you did, Mark. I can't remember who it was with Glow. I think it was with Glow a few months ago, and they mentioned about researching plugins and making sure you get the right plugins and things like that. Absolutely. So as long as they are kind of well regarded premium plugins, let's say, for the most part, you can enable auto updates and you'll be safe. But there are others, but WooCommerce is just one that within the WordPress community, it's kind of like, wait, don't update straight away. Make sure this is backed up. Do it on a staging site, test it, and then update it properly. So make sure your website's backed up. And I think this is the final thing, 11, the bus plan. I get asked this a lot. I don't know if people just want me dead. I'm not sure, but what happens if you get hit by a bus, Dom? So how much control do you have over your website? if you've dealt with a larger company, then I would think they'd have things in place, and there'll be people within the company that if someone who actually physically developed your site goes away, there's someone there that can step in and fill their boots, and they understand the workflow that they use and generally kind of how their process works. If it was built by a one-man band or a freelancer or something like that, just check what access you've got to your files. So in the event of them not even getting hit by a bus, but in the event of, you hear so much, it's one of like, we're one of those industries where you get people and we have a website, but we can never get in touch with the developer. So there's some things where they've moved office, they can't change the address in the footer, or they've got a new member of staff, but they can't get into the website to take down Barbara, who retired 5 years ago, or they've changed direction and they can't add anything to the site. So from at a basic level, can you actually just log in the site and change information that's in there? Have you been shown how to do that? And then beyond that, do you have access to sort of deeper information? Like, do you have access to the actual hosted control panel? Do you have passwords for that? Do you know where the backups are stored? And do you have access to the latest backup? Things like that. So just ask the question, how do I log into the site? If you want to, if you're happy that your developer's kind of taking care of all that and your site stayed relatively the same for the last months and years, then it's fine. But it's just, I don't want to scare anybody. The majority of cases, everything's going to be fine, but just be aware that sometimes things go wrong. And do you have access to that, the side of things that you need access to in order to sort those things out? So yeah, so as I say, that's the link. Where I've put links to everything. I've talked to all the resources that I've talked about, and there's a video of me on there going through the cookies thing and sort of explaining that in a bit more detail. So yeah, that was my 11 points. So hopefully
that's great, Dom. That's some fantastic points, and some, for a start off, you've added to my to-do list now, by the way. So yeah. You're in my bad books. But now that was great, and I think it's one of those things. I think for a lot of us, the website, you do it, you get excited about it when you first launch it, and slowly over time it gets forgotten, but gets less attention. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of like to say that the actual launch date is just the start. There's a lot of work involved in building a website, as you'll appreciate. So it feels like when you launch it, it's like a big phew moment where you're like, oh, thank goodness, we don't have to touch them anymore. We've got to write any more things and find any more pictures and make any more decisions. A bit like when you get your house done, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually, you've gone through all that in order to have a tool that you can then use to share information, promote yourself, get found in search engines. So there's more work to be done after that. But as you say, for a lot of companies and a lot of going through that process of a redesign or building from scratch, there's so many decisions and things that need to be done and things that need to be created that it can feel a bit like, well, we've got that now, we've got a nice website, so we'll just carry on as we were. And you do forget, you need to check in on things. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm kind of assuming that over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of people who've maybe had a relook at their website again, because maybe out of necessity more than anything else. Because I've certainly seen people have realized that actually it's in the times we've had, it's a great place to be putting this information. And actually, if people have now moved back online or more online than ever before, then what we are now presenting to these people is not really what we want to be presenting to these people. And we realize we've neglected it for the last however many months. No, absolutely. I know it's something I'm very aware of. Now, my website was launched just over 2 years ago, and kind of you've bolted bits on over the time as well, and I guess that's the other thing as well, is it becomes less smooth, if that makes sense, because you've kind of added bits as you've gone along, and then you kind of realize it just all doesn't fit together maybe in the way it should, and that there's kind of need to go back and have a re-look at that again. Yeah,
that's what I was saying about the links as well, about realize what you've got in your site. You probably, if you've got a blog, I mean, I've had a blog on my site since I think some of the posts I've got on there go back to 2014, but I very rarely reference them. And actually, I was looking at one, two of my best performing blog posts are from that time. Obviously, they've got evergreen content that people just find useful, but there's no way of getting to them unless they appear in a search result or I give the link to somebody, because I've not kind of I've not really realized the importance of those things. I've not linked to them anywhere. So again, if you're adding new content, make sure that there's that journey, people can get to it, and it's not just it's not just an island that you kind of link to on social, but there's no way of getting to it without diving through the site and trying to sort of hunt your way to it.
Absolutely. No, well, I mean, that's some brilliant bits of information there, Dom. So I really, really appreciate that. And like I mentioned, for people who are watching this, because we often get people watching these videos days and weeks after they were live. If they want to kind of get a hold of you and ask any questions, where's the best places to go?
The best place to get, well, the easiest way to get in touch with me is to drop me an email. I am on socials, but I'm kind of hit and miss with. So you're saying about doing your website. I've just done a digital marketing course, and it's just flagged up so many things that I've got to do. I've just got lists as long as my arm of stuff that I've got to work on, and yeah. So it's dom@cleanpagedesign.co.uk is the best way of getting in touch. You can ring me, but I'll do the sign of the cross and get you to leave a message and then ring you back because I hate using the phone. But no, you can ring me. My website, obviously, is cleanpagedesign.co.uk, and my details are on there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, but as I say, I'm hit and miss on those. Drop me a message by all means, and I will get to it and reply to you. But in terms of posting, I'm hopeless at the minute. But that's to be improved.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, if for whatever reason you can't find Dom and you want to just come to us directly, and we can push you in the right direction as well. So, thank you very much for your time, Dom. Lots of really, really important information, and I'm sure that'll help a lot of people. So, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Dom.